Today on History Gems we're looking at the Black Death. Where did it come from, what was it, and what happened?
All bacteria and viruses have been around for quite a long time. However, how the Black Death happened to Europe started in the year 1346. There was an outpost on the coast of the Black Sea run by Genoese traders called Kaffa, and it was under attack by Mongols. However, these Mongols got sick, and they got so sick that their entire army was decimated, and their leader, Janibeg, was so annoyed at the fact that his chance of capturing Kaffa was defeated by infection and disease that he took the rotting corpses of his troops and hurled them with catapults over the walls of Kaffa and left in a huff. The people of Kaffa decided to get out while they could, and of course with all these rotting corpses everywhere, the disease that had been in the Mongol soldiers was transported to these traders, and as they were traders, they spread it rapidly throughout the Mediterranean basin. And in the year 1347 and 1348, these infections starting in ports spread throughout Western Europe and up into Scandinavia by 1349.
And here is the culprit, the bacteria Yersinia pestis, which had actually been around for thousands of years in Asia. Ancient records had shown there had been outbreaks as close to Europe as Constantinople in the 6th century AD. What would happen is the bacteria would grow inside the guts of fleas, and these fleas would live on rats. So wherever there were rats, there was a potential for an outbreak of this deadly disease.
And that was the narrative for generations of history. Except in the 1990s, some scientists pointed out that there were some discrepancies between the modern-day version of this plague and the ancient chronicles, which led to a manhunt. Well, a bacteria hunt, actually. What else could have caused it? And indeed, generally, when we try and use the medieval chronicles, they're notoriously vague, or apocalyptic, or biblical, because the theory of germ theory didn't happen until the 19th century. The idea of tiny microorganisms affecting you and afflicting you didn't happen until many centuries after the outbreak of plague. It turns out that actually when we've done research on bodies of actual plague victims, they did have that disease. It could be that over the centuries it evolved and changed, which is why we see differences today. And it doesn't sort out situations like in Iceland getting the plague. They don't have any rats, so exactly how it got there, we don't know for sure. What we do know is that between a third and half of Europe's population was wiped out in a decade after the arrival of this plague. And it didn't stop there. People talk about the Black Death as if it was a one-off event, but if you look at chronicles, there were regular outbreaks of plague, some of them incredibly lethal, but now we were talking about more localized populations. In England, we know that in 1665 there was an outbreak of the plague, particularly in the London area, but then the Great Fire of London in 1666 seems to have wiped out all the rat population, and therefore it never appeared again in Europe. Well, at least in England. There were the odd little outbreaks above and beyond, but it seems that by the late 17th century it had kind of burnt itself out, and indeed today there has never been some mass inoculation against Black Death, the plague, but it just doesn't happen anymore.
14th century medicine was of course completely unprepared for something like this. This rather sinister image is actually of a medieval doctor. The hooked beak is where he would have had herbs to keep the air fresh. That wouldn't have helped. But what it did do is fundamentally change society. Peasants could move, dynasties died out, there was no protection, be you rich or poor. So it's actually the most important event to happen in medieval history. A rather grim one this week. As always, if you like this, History Gems is on Facebook and on Twitter, and of course there's the Busy Person's Guide to British History, the book. Do check it out on Amazon. See you soon.